Hello, YouTube. 115 years after the 1908 celestial visitor arrived in Siberia in Russia and perished, the strangeness has not subsided. Now the place of the Tunguska phenomenon is very popular with tourists. However, getting there is still not easy. First, from the village of Vanavara by boat, it is necessary to get 75 kilometers along the river and then on foot for 2 days with one night basically to stomp their 40 kilometers. Along the way, they say all sorts of mysticism happens every now and then, up to the phenomena of mass hallucinations. The strangest events associated with the mass hallucinations occur during an overnight stay at the Vernadsky Ridge, 22 kilometers from the explosion site. You can hear people talking somewhere, a bonfire or a campfire is burning, but no one can find where this is happening. According to Evgenia Moroz, Deputy Director of the Environmental Education of the Tunguska Nature Reserve, and in the winter, when she went with the group, she recalls, they heard some kind of howl of unknown origin in that place. It caused a feeling of anxiety. They know how wolves howl. It wasn't them. And there was no wind then. It is impossible to explain this sound. Along the way, by the way, you can encounter Leonid Kulik's small settlement shelter, Zaimka in Russian. He was the first researcher of the Tunguska phenomenon, at least the official one. These are several houses built from the same trees that were demolished by the explosion in 1908. At that time, the scientists did not find a single intact tree in the area. There is a geomagnetic anomaly zone in the explosion zone. The GPS navigator stops working. As soon as she launched the quadcopter, it seemed to go crazy and try to fly away to the taiga, Evgenia Moroz shared with Russian journalists this information. The electronic clock does not work here either. The internet is disappearing. They are already used to this and do not rely on GPS in those places, only on the skills of orientation on the terrain. I want to tell you right now that we'll come back to Evgenia later because I want to tell you about the paranormal lake there, the anomalous preserved Suzdalevo Lake. Such anomalous lakes on the Tunguska Nature Reserve serve as a place of fear because this is the main plot for rumors about the mysterious phenomena in this zone. Allegedly, everyone who got to the lake crossed the portal and exited 500 kilometers from the place of the entrance. This water reservoir is well hidden. You can cross this point only by signing for the water tour. Later, I will describe more about the state reserve and the tours, but just know that there is a way to get to the lake. Now, fragments of a meteorite were found in the bottom sediments of this natural reservoir. Now it is believed that it is Suzdalevo and not Cheko. That is the funnel from the explosion that occurred as a result of the celestial bolides' contact with our planet. And the so-called silvery clouds constantly appear above the pool of water. But just remember, it was a meteorite. We don't know which one and how many ages ago it fell down. Okay. The village of Krustalny, which appeared in the Soviet times and existed for years because of the exploration of the deposits of the so-called Icelandic spar, is relatively close. It is on the Chamba River. The ruins of the miners' working trading post exude mysteries. Many miners from the mining plant and geologists disappeared without a trace. And to some people, this mystery is much more interesting than the meteorite one. Here, I can add something from my personal knowledge. My father, Boris, had served in the Soviet Army communication units in Siberia in the mid-1950s when Khrushchev was gaining control of the USSR. My father had seen a lot of strange things in the taiga, including the hunt by the KGB, it had a different name at the time, for the escaped criminal prisoners, cannibals who killed and ate local geologists. Now, where the explosion occurred, a new forest has long grown. But among the trees, even after 115 years, you can find burnt, fallen trunks. They have been preserved only because it is a strong Siberian larch, and its barrels, so to say, are still aimed at the center of the explosion. The Tunguska Nature Reserve is located in Evenk. As you know, a meteorite fell here at the beginning of the last century, but this is a hypothesis that is promulgated by many scientists, but I do not believe it for a second. You can find out more about my continuous research of the Tunguska phenomenon or event and views. You can look at the attached playlist and see it in the description to this video. And the playlist will be listed so you can look at my videos. But I have to use the description generally accepted and stated for the sake of coherence. I will add a few comments, but let me continue with the story of the reserve, and what's going on there. Scientists are still trying to solve the mystery of the celestial body, but the main mission of the protected areas is the specially protected natural territories of Russia is as follows: protection of unique nature, deer, bears, wolves, peregrine falcons, eagles, and more than 40 species of rare fish live in the taiga. Evgenia Moroz now works as an inspector of the Tunguska Nature Reserve. She has been used to the forest life since childhood. Her grandfather taught her all the taiga wisdom, to navigate by trees, to how to get fish, how to look for water where there is none. For her, the work related to the forest and its protection is not difficult. She copes on a par with man. She gets high from nature itself. For Evgenia, religion is nature. She likes to watch the animal world, and she loves the northern lights over the territory. Evgenia did not immediately get this job. At first, she worked in the Department of the Environmental Education of the protected area. But when the reserve needed an inspector, she immediately changed her position. By the way, she also has a legal education. It helps a lot when drawing up protocols for poachers. During her time as the inspector, everything happened according to Evgenia. Even drunk violators had to be detained. It did not lead to an acute conflict, but the employee is ready for any such scenario. She knows how to handle a weapon. She has an excellent command of the Saiga rifle in her possession. According to Evgenia, working as an inspector there requires physical endurance. We have very harsh winter. Minus 50 Celsius degrees is still holding up. We have to go on long routes, long itineraries on snowmobiles, she said. So, did the meteorite fall harm the animals of the Tunguska Nature Reserve? Evgenia Moroz shared this story of how the research took place in the epicenter of the explosion. A scientific laboratory was built not far from the mysterious Lake Cheko. Shrubs, trees, and the territory of the lake were subjected to the laboratory examination for radiation contamination. The risks were high because the permanent residents of Cheko are not only whooper swans but also red book listed black-throat loons. According to the results of the study, the radiation background of the reserve was natural. The laboratory remained a place of attraction for researchers from all over the Soviet Union for many years. But we already know about the other lake. Anyway, she was asked, what exploded 115 years ago over the Tunguska taiga? There are so many hypotheses. And she answered, now our research is conducting study of lakes in the reserve. A high concentration of metal was found in Lake Cheka in the 1908 layer, which confirms the hypothesis that it was a meteorite. But I like the hypothesis expressed by the science fiction writer Kazantsov, who suggested that an alien spaceship crashed here, and all the Vanavaras are descendants of aliens. She's a very smart young lady, capable inspector, and Kazantsov, by the way, was much more than just a science fiction writer. And I suggest you read more about him in my books. He was a very interesting person, former military, and I think his role in the creation of the Soviet ufology was incredible. And in his later years, he helped the young people of the Kosmopoisk Paranormal Research Organization. I loved his books also when I read them. It's not only, of course, science fiction, non-fiction too. And he's a very interesting personality, was. But let's leave him alone for now and go look at the event itself in greater detail. The Tunguska catastrophe or disaster is one of the biggest mysteries of the last century. Despite numerous reports from witnesses and the expedition, fragments of the meteorite were never found. The theory prevailed in the scientific community that it exploded before it had time to fall to the surface. Almost exactly 115 years ago, on June 30th, 1908, residents of eastern Siberia could observe the incredible sight. A large object engulfed in flames flew across the sky from the southeast to the northwest. Then it exploded in the remote taiga, boreal forest. The explosion was comparable in power to the explosion of a hydrogen bomb. Seismographs all over the planet reacted to the most powerful blast wave, and the rumble could be heard for thousands of kilometers away. This event is called the Tunguska phenomenon after the name of the local river Podkamennaya Tunguska, or the Tunguska meteorite. Such a discrepancy is not accidental. After all, even after more than a century, we do not fully understand what really happened then. The hypothesis about the meteorite explosion appeared 2 weeks later. With the filing of the press report 115 years ago, newspapermen shared amazing details with readers. They said that the meteorite fell not in the taiga but next to the railway. The driver of the nearby train, the engine master of the nearby train, immediately stopped the train, and all the passengers rushed to the crash site as a crowd. It was not possible to examine the meteorite closer since it was incandescent, wrote newspaper Siberian Life in 1908. Subsequently, when it had already cooled down, it was examined by various persons from the sidings and engineers passing along the road. According to the stories of these persons, the meteorite almost all crashed into the ground. Only its tip sticks out. It is a pale stone mass reaching the size of close to 6 cubic fathoms. Well, no pale meteorite was actually found, but there was no one to refute this false information at the time. The nearest settlement to the explosion site is the village of Vanavara. It is located 60 kilometers from the meteorite impact site and 732 kilometers from Krasnoyarsk. It is not surprising that in 1908 no one got to the site of the explosion. Far away, it's quite far away, and then there is the taiga. Only 13 years later, Soviet meteorologist Leonid Kulik went on an expedition to find the meteorite. Now, please let me add that there were secretive expeditions to the site before him, and you can find more about this fascinating story in my books, lectures, and videos in this channel. In general, there were many expeditions to the place of the Tunguska phenomenon in the 20th century. During that first one in 1921, scientists managed only to collect the testimony of eyewitnesses. Again, I repeat, the official expedition. Later, in 1927, researchers found a ruined forest in the taiga, but the meteorite itself was not found. Only grains of minerals with potentially celestial or cosmic origin. Well, how so? Don't say Tunguska meteorite. We still don't know its nature. Viktor Grachovsky, a member of the Committee on Meteorites of the Russian Academy of Sciences, professor of the Ural Federal University, immediately corrected Russian journalists who strike up a conversation. It is more correct to say Tunguska phenomenon. It was an intrusion of a certain body into the Earth's atmosphere with accompanying effects. One of the effects is that the explosion knocked down thousands of kilometers of forests. The trees lay down so that their trunks pointed directly at the epicenter of the explosion. It would seem, well, here is a marker where to look for. Why didn't they find the fallen celestial body? It turns out that not everything is so simple. The explosion occurred not on the ground but in the sky when more than 10 kilometers remained to get to the surface. The fact is that even if it was a meteorite, ordinary ballistics say that it is necessary to look not under the explosion point but much further away, explains Viktor Grachovsky. And the experience of the last small meteorites shows that many factors strongly influence the place where the meteorite will fall. At high altitude, even the wind can take down fragments, and then the Tunguska phenomenon occurred in 1908. Here we literally immediately leave for fresh falls and can't find anything, and then more than 10 years passed before the first expedition took place. Due to the fact that the meteorite was never found, the Tunguska phenomenon has become overgrown with many myths, according to such scientists as him. Some blame aliens for everything. Allegedly, their spaceship got into the airspace, got into an accident in the outer space. Others are sure that it was an experiment by the inventor Nikola Tesla on wireless transmission of electricity over long distances. There is a belief among the Chun Tungus people that the explosion was caused by iron thunderbirds agdy, or in the Evenk language, agdillan. That's what the workers from the Evenk Museum of Local Lore told Russian journalists. There's a hypothesis that the Tunguska meteorite was stuffed with diamonds. This allegedly explains that minerals characteristic of diamond-bearing meteorites were found in the taiga. A lot of fairy tales have been invented. When a conference was held to mark the 80th anniversary of the Tunguska phenomenon, 120 alternative hypotheses were voiced there, and the most fantastic ones, Viktor Grachovsky noted. And what is the most fantastic hypothesis? Allegedly, it was an explosion of a cloud of mosquitoes. And he laughs. There were suggestions that these were fireballs and plasmoids, but no one was talking about Nikola Tesla at the moment. It became fashionable in the 1990s. The most realistic hypothesis for today, to Grachovsky, sounds like this. There was no meteorite, and there was a comet. Either a whole one flew to us, or it was a fragment from one of the comets that sometimes lurked in the solar system. Comets mainly consist of ice covered with inclusions of solid matter, explains Viktor Grachovsky. It is useless to look for ice after the explosion, and what fell out in the form of a small fraction as a result, it is difficult to distinguish from terrestrial analogues. So although I disagree with him, I am grateful for the information that he also has provided, Viktor Grachovsky. Now, let's look at a little bit more information about this Tunguska phenomenon or Tunguska object. Flight speed was about 70 kilometers a second in the atmosphere. Explosion temperature about 1000 degrees Celsius. Weight was about 1 million tons. Explosion power approximately 12 megatons, according to the latest data. Some say more. Now let's look at the reserve itself in greater detail from official descriptions. The Tunguska Nature Reserve is famous for the place of the fall of the meteorite of the same name, a large population of sable and elk, unexplained anomalies, memorable water adventures, excavations of the first civilizations of the south of the central Siberian plateau. The Tunguska State Natural Biosphere Reserve is located in the southern half of the central Siberian plateau. Its total area is 296,562 hectares. It lies in a solid array within the borders from the Podkamennaya Tunguska to the upper reaches of the Yadulikan from south to north, and from the Kamchukan marshes to the lower Dulushma from west to east. Geographically, it is located within the Evenk district of the Krasnoyarsk territory. Visitors get there through the village of Vanarava, which is the central estate of the reserve. That it's located on Moskovskaya Street, number 8. It is impossible to come to the mentioned settlement, but to get there, it's only by water, by airplane, or by helicopter, including from Krasnoyarsk. On June 30, 1908, residents of the local settlements, or Zaimki, who grew up in the interflux of Podkamennaya Tunguska and Chunya, noticed a huge fireball flying to the ground. Later, a circular section of fallen taiga with an area of 2,000 square kilometers was discovered 70 kilometers from the observation site. Scientists who examined the point believe that the explosion of an unidentified celestial body was equal to 40 megatons. Or maybe it was more powerful. Some rivers of the Tunguska Nature Reserve lead to that area. Trees in the affected area were burned. The epicenter turned out to be a bald spot with a diameter of several hundred meters. Only after 100 years, the local tree stand was fully restored. The designated land was decided to be reserved in October of 1995. The idea of conservation of the disaster area belongs to the researcher Leonid Kulik. Together with the like-minded people, he first organized a nature reserve, and then came the Tunguska Nature Reserve. All activities of the Tunguska Nature Reserve today are based on protection of the fragment of the taiga biotope entrusted to it from the anthropogenic factor, scientific work, study of the impact of the meteorite fall on flora and fauna, monitoring the number and movement of individuals in populations are taken into account, organization of ecological tourism around the points of permitted visits, implementation of educational activities among tourists and the public, search for the causes and details of the celestial catastrophe of June 30, 1908, relief and climate. The nature of the Tunguska Nature Reserve has developed in the conditions of a cold continental climate, traditional for most of western and eastern Siberia. That is, in winter it is very cold here, up to minus 58 degrees Celsius. The soil freezes hard. And in summertime, it is very hot, up to plus 33 degrees Celsius, and fires are quite possible. And yet, more often in the cold season, the temperature ranges from minus 15 to minus 19 degrees, and in the summer, from plus 20 to plus 27. There is not much precipitation. There is no special drought there. The snow cover is average. Only western and southwestern winds get there, bringing minor atmospheric fronts in the off-season and saving clouds in July. By the way, to swim in the Podkamena Tunguska River, I think it's best in July, and that's what's recommended by those who had been there. The relief of this corner of Russia is simple. This section of the interfluvi of the Podkamena Tunguska and Chunya is a low plateau containing quaternary sediments. Just in them, the local rivers, the branches of the Chunya and the Podkamena Tunguska, deepen the land on their route. In the center is a shallow crater formed in the Mesozoic period. At that time, it was still a volcano. The elevated zone is the center of the northern border of the forbidden territory. It includes an episode of the Lakura Ridge, and it is a chain of hills, the tops of which correspond to the elevations from 300 to 533 meters above sea level. The highest mountain is level 533 meters. It has too many nicknames. Next to it is Farrington, 522 meters. Hills from 100 to 300 meters high lead to them. Soils are also not striking in diversity. On the peaks of the hills, there are tundra varieties of soils with a relatively thick layer of humus. On their slopes, as well on the tops of the hills, there are the so-called podzols and the brown podzols. In river valleys, swamp, peat, and the podzolic turf soils. There is little humus layer due to permafrost. So what are the sites there? Well, the Kulik Zaimka, the place of the Tunguska meteorite fall. For guests, the Tunguska Nature Reserve starts from here. After all, most people are coming here because of this piece of taiga. The cosmic celestial patch lies in the interfluve of Hushma and Kimchu. The complex Kulik's Hut, that's the name, John's Stone, is the largest birch grove of the reserve. There's also the mountain, Farrington Mountain, the hill of Stoikovich, Suslovskaya, Funnel. The top of 533, I mentioned it before, in Lakura Hills. Kobai Island, a piece of land among the swamps. It was within these limits that scientific events related to the investigation of the site of the cosmic catastrophe unfolded. In fact, every direction indicated concerns this location. They come here on foot, fly, and swim. And more often, they combine different methods, the visitors. All the listed objects were also dubbed the meteorite Zaimka. It was here that the forest once burned down and those coniferous trunks that remained dried up. But they still stand, marking the extreme circumference of the epicenter. Some are already lying down. Dead wood is now called telegraph forest because the trunks look like pillars. They were badly burned, the craters of the local marshes, and this is far from the most swampy area of the reserve, seemed suspicious to Kulik. The scientists put forward an assumption. There are craters from fragments in front of him. And for John Stone, That stone was discovered by a member of the 1973 expedition, Jan Anfinogenov. He had Anglo-Saxon name, first name. This refers to a low, rounded stone covered with lichen. There is a faint suspicion that this is a fragment of the Tunguska meteorite. A magnetic anomaly is recorded around it, and the composition is quite earthy, terrestrial. This is a block of quartz. The Kulik's huts are log cabins built from burned forests. The logs mysteriously resist rotting. And from these heights, you will see everything at once. Suslovskaya funnel is a swamp dried by Kulik for the purpose of inspection of the bottom surface. According to his assumption, it was formed by the impact of a meteorite. The works were carried out in the years 1929-1930. The Tunguska Meteorite Museum in Vanavara village, in the Okolo-Zapovednaya or reserve adjacent municipality, the Tunguska Nature Reserve has an interesting springboard for studying the explosion and the Evenk people. Here, in any case, the visitor will have to come to in the first place because of the Reserve Administration Office. That's where it is. Museum workers have collected a curious collection there. Antiques, photographs, books, all this previously belonged to the old-timers of the Evenk district, including scientists who had been on expeditions to investigate the celestial accident. Among the valuable artifacts is an element of a shamanic costume. Nearby is a loon made of metal. Back in the pre-Soviet era, a 5-liter copper teapot from the Tsar's times attracts the eye. An intriguing set of Evenk national agricultural implements as well as various utensils. Remember that the exposition room is located in the building of the visitor center on the Moskovskaya Street, number 8. What about archaeological sites in the northern and western parts of the reserve? Well, on the Lakura Hills, the Tunguska Nature Reserve has a magnificent landscape. Among these bright tracks are the hills Chambi, Suksheno, and the White Mountain. Ancient population sites have been found here, as well as on the lower Lakura and Panalinka rivers. That's the buffer, so to say, of the reserve. The site of the sixth excavation is already the outskirts of the village of Askoba. The excavations revealed several rich cultural layers at once, the stone, bronze, and iron ages. The ancestors of the Evenks lived here, some of whom apparently migrated to America a long, long time ago. Now, the so-called wild, or not organized by tour agencies, itineraries throughout the Tunguska Nature Reserve can be any, but they all relate exclusively to the buffer zone. But you can be brought to the explosion site only during the organized tours. Be warned, it is very easy to get lost in this dense area. Ask for directions from the inspectors of the reserve, and since you wander around the buffer zone, you can ask fishermen and hunters, the elk hunters, or the deer hunters. These comrades have a few traps all around this area, as well as the warehouses. These are the huts of the Hanti-Mansi type, just as in the Dyatlov Pass narrative, by the way. What is meant here is a temporary warehouse protected by piles from all kinds of animals, labaz. While the rules of the conduct on the very borders of the reserve can be summed up as follows: extreme caution. The encounter with a bear is entirely on your conscience. The club-footed ones, as the bears are referred to sometimes in Russian language, are impudent here, but bears may not be the most dangerous beings in that area. Please remember what the young and brave female inspector shared with us about the strange phenomena in the taiga, in the reserve. Organized tours to the Tunguska Nature Reserve are available and are called the Kulik Trail, mixed first, mixed second, helicopter, and water. This is what I wanted to share with you about the Tunguska phenomenon, and I will bring you more information as the time goes by, because I'm fascinated by this event as well. And there's much more to it. And I've spent years and I've collected quite a lot. And it's in my books, like I said. But I also try to put as much as I can in videos. And I continue my research. And if you can support my research, please do so. You can find how to do it in the description to this video. Please tell others about my channel. Please like my videos. Please subscribe to my channel. Thank you.